Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to share a pop-up card with you today. The folks over at Stampendous were kind enough to send me some goodies to play with, and I'm really excited about these stamps and dies. For this card, I'll be using the Pop Cupcake stamp set and the Pop Shapes cutting dies. And I wanted to go over these Pop Shapes cutting dies really quick because there are other stamp sets that coordinate with this die set. So the top for the frosting on the cupcake actually fits around the sunflowers in the Pop Sunflower stamp set. And then you get the jar and the little sunflower, the single sunflower die as well. And I'll make sure to have everything linked down in the description box below for you. The other die set that they sent me was the Pop Frames cutting dies. And I'm going to be using some of those dies in this card as well, but I did want to bring in the stamp set that coordinates with this die set. And that little flap, when you die cut it, it makes the image pop away from the card. And again, there are more stamp sets that coordinate with the Pop Shapes cutting dies as well. So moving right along, I left most of the coloring out, but I did definitely want to share how I colored the frosting on the cupcake. And I'm going to have it sped up a little bit faster a little bit later on. I just wanted to briefly go over how I got the shading done on the frosting itself. I stamped the image with Memento Tuxedo black ink onto a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock, which is my personal favorite cardstock for Copic coloring. I started out with my darkest color, which is E29, and I'll make sure to have all of the Copics that I used listed in the description box below for you, as well as the products. Anyway, with the E29, you can see that on the very top swirl of the frosting, I pretty much traced very, very close to the stamped line around that. When I went down to the first lump in the frosting, I did leave a little bit of white space between the stamped line and the E29. And then I continued with each level of the frosting. When I got down to the middle-ish part, I left white space above the stamped line, and I left a tiny little bit of white space below that stamped line. Next, I came in with my mid-tone, and for the very top swirl, I just extended it a tiny little bit. Then for that first swirl in the frosting, I colored over the E29 and extended up, but I'm still leaving that white space between the stamped line and the E29. And I continue on for each section of the frosting, where I extend the E29 down a little bit from the top of the swirl, and then I extend up a little bit above the stamped line on each of the swirls. I really hope I'm describing this. I'm also trying to keep my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing and see what I'm talking about while I'm actually doing it. Once I was done with the E57, I came in with E25, and I did the same thing. I extended it out, but again, I'm leaving the white space. One thing to note is that as I'm coming in with each of my markers, I am coloring over what I had previously colored. The reason that I like to do that is that it helps the colors blend a little bit more. And since the E29 was so dark, I didn't lose all of the shading that I had done previously. And also by leaving the little tiny bit of white space both above and below the actual stamped lines, that leaves enough room for a really good highlight when I come in with E23, which is going to be my lightest color. And that way I get even more of that layered, shiny, frosting look, I guess is the best way to explain it. Once I was done with the E25, I came in with the E23 and I just filled in all of the white space. As I color with the E23, again, I am going over all of the other markers that I had previously colored, but I'm trying not to be too heavy-handed with it because I didn't want to bleach out, for lack of a better description, the darker colors. Moving right along, for your card base, you are going to need 2 pieces of cardstock. Your outside piece will measure 4 1/4 by 11, and you'll score that at 5.5 inches. So your basic top folding A2 size note card. The inside piece is going to measure 4 inches by 10 3/4 inches. With the 10 3/4 inches up at the top of your scoreboard, you want to score that also at 5.5 inches. For your inside piece, I do recommend that you use a good heavyweight cardstock. For my inside piece, I used 100-pound pure white cardstock from Cardstock Warehouse. The other thing you want to make sure that you do is crease those folds very well with a bone folder or an acrylic block or whatever it is that you use to crease your cards. Now, to get that pop-up piece, you're going to use this tall rectangle die. And on either side of those little notches that are sticking out, those are the pieces that are going to line up with your score line for your inside piece of cardstock. Those little notches, those little arms sticking out, they don't cut, they just kind of reinforce a score. So you want to make sure that you have those little arms lined up perfectly with your score line. Then you'll tack it down with some low tack tape and run it through your die cut machine. To get that mechanism to work, you want to push in from the back side so that it is actually on the inside of the card. And it makes it really easy to do because there are score lines that are embossed into that piece after you run it through your die cut machine. Then you want to use your bone folder and crease those score lines really very well to make sure that the score lines on your pop-out piece are nice and crisp. That will help it hold its shape once the card is opened. Now, to adhere the inside piece to your main card base, I would recommend that you line it up where you want it, close the interior piece down, add adhesive. Make sure that you don't add adhesive too close to the little notch that's die cut out. Once you have it lined up on the inside of your card where you want it, you want to close the top of your card and then press down so your adhesive sticks really nicely. Then you're going to flip the interior piece up to the top and add adhesive to that side as well. And again, make sure you avoid adhesive on that die cut piece, otherwise your little pop out piece won't pop out correctly. And here you can see when you open the card how that piece pops out. I had done the coloring of the candles off camera just to save a little bit of time, but to put the card together I had cut a piece of patterned cardstock just slightly smaller than my card base. I used another piece of patterned paper, and this is where I brought in the scalloped edger die from the pop frame die set. And just to make those scallops stand out a little bit more, I just used a little bit of ink around the edge on that. I set that aside so the ink had a chance to dry while I arranged my candles on my little circles that I had also die cut. I wanted to have the front candle popped up, so I put some foam tape on the back side of one of the candles. For the other two candles, I just used liquid glue to adhere those onto the front of the circle. I used my tape runner to adhere my scalloped die cut piece to the front of the card as well. And I did want to have my little circle with the candles popped up, so I put a whole bunch of foam tape on the back side of that and adhered that to the front of the card. Now for the cupcake, after I had colored the frosting as well as the cupcake paper, I did use the coordinating dies to cut those out. When I adhered my frosting to the cupcake paper, I used liquid glue and I put just a tiny little bit along the bottom edge of the cupcake frosting to make sure that I didn't have glue all too far up on the frosting. Had I had too much glue on the top of the frosting, it would have ended up gluing my card shut once I adhered it to my little pop-up piece. Now, when adhering this to the inside of the card, I would recommend that you use a good strong glue or tape runner on that little flap. The other tip is add the adhesive directly on your little pop-out piece so you know exactly where you need your adhesive to go. And when I placed my cupcake on my pop-out piece, I made sure to have the cupcake raised up just a tiny little bit from the bottom of the little pop-out piece. That way it wouldn't impede how the card closes. Once I had my cupcake adhered in place, I thought the inside needed to be zhuzhed up a little bit, so I used some of the polka dot patterned paper again with the scalloped die from the pop frame set and cut a piece to go on the bottom front. Then I added another piece up at the top just to give the cupcake a little bit more of a background and add more interest to the inside of the card. For the sentiment, which reads "Birthday calories don't count," I stamped that with VersaFine Onyx black ink, and then I used one of the fun scallopy frames from the Pop Frame Cutting Dies set, and I adhered that to one of the other frames, just slightly larger, and adhered that on the inside of my card. To finish it up, I couldn't resist. I had to add a little bit of sparkle to those candle flames, so I used my Wink of Stella glitter pen for that. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. I'll be back with another video using the Pop Frames cutting die with the Pop Frames stamp set, and I'll probably do another one with the sunflower set too. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.